Most women think the hardest part of divorce is getting out. The yelling, the lawyers, the exhaustion of fighting for every inch of freedom. But what if that wasn't the part that costs you the most? What if the real damage comes quietly, months or even years later, when you realize what you didn't protect? Because in a high-conflict divorce, your attention is always being pulled toward what's loudest. The insults, the threats, the endless back and forth that wears you down until you just want to sign the papers and be done with it. And that's exactly when the biggest mistakes get made. Not because you didn't care, but because you were too tired to notice what you were giving up. It's not just the house or the car or the bank account. It's the small details with big consequences. The things you thought could wait. The protections you assumed were automatic. And the rights you didn't realize you were walking away from, until it was too late to take them back. This video isn't about fear. It's about clarity. About making sure that when you leave, you're not just escaping something painful. You're stepping into something stronger. These are the 7 things most women forget to protect during a high-conflict divorce. Some of them are financial, some are legal, and some are deeply personal. But all of them matter more than you think. So before you sign anything, before you say, "I just want it over," watch this. Because what you protect today could be the thing that saves your future. In the chaos of divorce, most people focus on what's right in front of them. Who keeps the house, how to split the savings, who gets the car. But one of the most valuable assets in any marriage isn't sitting in a driveway or a bank account. It's tucked away in a retirement fund, quietly growing while you're too overwhelmed to notice. And in high-conflict divorces, that's exactly the kind of thing that slips through the cracks. Retirement accounts, like 401(k)s, pensions, IRAs, are often in one spouse's name. And in many cases, that spouse is the one who earned more, worked longer, or had the job with the benefits. If you're not paying attention, you might assume those funds aren't yours to touch. But that's not true. In most cases, retirement savings built during the marriage are considered joint property. But here's the catch. They're not automatically divided. If you don't specifically ask for your share, you may never see a dime of it. Too many women walk away from these negotiations thinking they're being fair, being reasonable, just trying to keep the peace. But fairness doesn't mean silence. And if you don't bring up those accounts, no one else will do it for you. Once the divorce is finalized, you can't go back and ask for what you missed. That door closes, and with it, years of financial stability you may desperately need later. You need to ask your lawyer about a QDRO, a Qualified Domestic Relations Order. It's the legal tool that makes sure you get your portion of a retirement account without penalty. Without it, even if you're technically entitled to part of it, you won't see a cent. It's one piece of paper. But it can mean the difference between struggling in your 60s and retiring with dignity. So ask yourself, are you fighting for what matters, or just trying to get through the fight? Because the version of you 5, 10, or 20 years from now is counting on you to protect her future, not just her present. It's one of the last things people think about during a divorce, until it becomes one of the most urgent. Health insurance. When you're married, it often feels like a background benefit, something that just comes with the relationship. But the moment that marriage ends, so does the automatic coverage. And if your health insurance was tied to your spouse's job, you could be left completely exposed. For women going through high-conflict divorces, this detail is often buried under bigger battles. You're fighting for custody. You're trying to protect your finances. You're just trying to survive the emotional wreckage. But here's what happens when this one issue gets ignored. You wake up a few months later, you go to schedule a doctor's appointment, and you find out you're no longer covered. And the cost of replacing that coverage? It can be staggering. Sure, there's COBRA, but it's temporary. And expensive. And not always the right long-term solution. Some women assume they'll be eligible for state coverage or that their ex will figure something out for them. But that rarely happens. And if you have medical needs, chronic conditions, or just want the peace of mind of being protected, you need to build this into your agreement now. Not after the fact when the bills start rolling in. You can negotiate continued coverage as part of spousal support. Or you can ask for financial compensation that helps you buy a private plan. But if you don't bring it up, no one else is going to prioritize it for you. And the worst part? Insurance gaps don't just cost money. They cost health. Because when coverage disappears, people stop going to the doctor. They delay treatments. They ignore symptoms. And small problems become big ones fast. So ask your lawyer, what happens to my coverage after this divorce is final? What's the backup plan? What's written into the agreement that guarantees I'm not left with nothing? Because protecting your health isn't a luxury. It's survival. And no divorce settlement is worth the risk of losing that. Here's the trap almost no one talks about, because it doesn't hit you until it's too late. You get through the divorce, the assets are divided, and the papers are signed. You think you've walked away clean. But then one day, a letter shows up. A missed credit card payment. A collection notice. A loan default you didn't know about. And your name is right there, tied to it. Because the court may have split the debt, but the creditors didn't. That's the hard truth. Divorce decrees don't override your contracts. If your name is still on a joint account, the lender doesn't care who the judge assigned the debt to. If your ex stops paying, it's your credit score that takes the hit. Your financial future. Your ability to buy a car, rent a home, qualify for a loan. And by the time you figure it out, the damage has already been done. Too many women assume that once the paperwork is filed, everything is final. But debt is sticky. It lingers. And unless you take specific steps to remove your name, it follows you like a shadow. That joint credit card from 5 years ago? Still yours. That auto loan you co-signed to be supportive? Still yours. That mortgage you thought was his problem now? Still partially yours, unless it's refinanced or your name is legally removed. This isn't just about protecting your money. It's about protecting your peace. Because there's nothing more frustrating than rebuilding your life after divorce, only to be pulled back into chaos because someone else didn't hold up their end of the deal. So ask your lawyer, what debts am I still legally tied to? What steps need to be taken to remove my name completely? Don't just accept, he's responsible for that now. Get proof. Get paperwork. Get closure. Because protecting your future means cutting every cord that still ties you to a mess you didn't create. And your signature should never be the reason your second chance starts with a setback. In high-conflict divorces, people hide things. That's not paranoia. It's reality. And today, it's easier than ever to move money into places you can't see. We're not just talking about offshore accounts or shady business deals. We're talking about digital assets, crypto wallets, Venmo transfers, Cash App balances, even NFTs and online investments that don't show up on a basic financial statement. And if you're not asking the right questions, these assets can disappear without a trace. This is one of the most overlooked areas in modern divorces, especially for women who are up against someone manipulative, controlling, or financially secretive. You might think everything's been disclosed, but what if your spouse has a second Coinbase account? Or has been moving money into digital wallets you don't even know exist? These platforms aren't regulated the same way traditional banks are. And unless your lawyer specifically digs into them, they might never show up in discovery. The danger is this: if you don't know what to look for, you won't know what you're missing. You might agree to a settlement thinking everything's been divided fairly, when in reality, there's a stash of digital money sitting quietly under someone else's name. And once the divorce is finalized, you have no legal claim to it. It's gone. That's why this isn't just about trust. It's about verification. Ask your lawyer if they're working with forensic accountants or tech experts who know how to trace crypto transactions. Insist on full digital asset disclosure. Push for account logins, transaction histories, wallet addresses, anything that confirms what actually exists. Because what's invisible during the process becomes irreversible after it. This isn't about being suspicious. It's about being smart. Because in today's world, money doesn't always live in a bank. And if you don't look for it, you'll never know what was yours to begin with. Here's something that slips through the cracks far too often, because it doesn't feel urgent in the moment. You're focused on dividing what already exists, but what about what's coming later? What about the family inheritance you were once promised? The business your spouse built during the marriage? The future value of something that's not on paper yet, but very real? In high-conflict divorces, people get strategic. They play the long game. And that means they might offer you the obvious assets like the house or the car, while quietly keeping the ones that will grow in value over time. A business they claim is barely breaking even. A trust fund you weren't really involved in. A family property that's not technically yours. And if you don't specifically protect your interest in those things, they vanish. No judge is going to hand them to you later if you didn't ask when it mattered. This happens a lot in cases where one spouse handles most of the finances or comes from a wealthy family. Maybe you were told you'd benefit from a future estate. Maybe you helped build a business from the ground up, but your name was never on the paperwork. Maybe you made sacrifices, career, time, identity, so they could grow something. That has value. And it deserves protection. Ask your lawyer. Are there future assets, investments, businesses, inheritances, intellectual property, that I have a legal or marital claim to? What documents prove my involvement? What language can we include in the agreement to preserve my rights? Because once you waive it, it's gone. You can't go back 5 years later and say, actually, I helped build that. The law doesn't work like that. And your silence can be taken as permission to exclude you. So don't just fight for what you can see. Fight for what you've helped create. Fight for what's coming next. Because your future wealth, and your future freedom, might already be in motion. You just have to make sure it stays yours. Some women believe that once the divorce papers are signed, the conflict ends. But anyone who's been through a high-conflict separation knows that the tension doesn't always go away. It just finds new ways to show up. Nasty texts. Unwanted visits. Financial sabotage. Subtle threats masked as concern. And unless you've built in legal protections from the start, there's not much stopping it from continuing indefinitely. It's a part of the process most women don't think about. Because in the middle of fighting for custody, finances, and freedom, the last thing you want to imagine is that the harassment might keep going. But it does. And when it does, it hits harder than you expect. Because now, you thought you were finally safe. That's why it's not enough to just finalize the divorce. You have to include legal boundaries within the settlement itself. Communication restrictions. Location limits. Enforcement mechanisms if those boundaries are crossed. Otherwise, you're left relying on vague promises and your own patience, which will eventually wear thin. Ask your lawyer. Can we include clauses that limit contact to only necessary communication? Can we outline specific consequences for ongoing harassment, financial manipulation, or boundary violations? Can we document patterns of behavior now, before they escalate? Because the law can protect you, but only if you ask for it to. Without those clauses, you'll be forced to go back to court every time something happens. And in the meantime, the emotional wear and tear continues. Your healing gets delayed. Your peace feels fragile. And the trauma doesn't get a chance to settle. This isn't about being dramatic. It's about being prepared. If you know the person you're divorcing has a history of control, manipulation, or hostility, you have every right to protect your space, your sanity, and your future. Make those protections legal. Make them specific. Make them enforceable. Because a clean break shouldn't leave the door open for more damage. It should close it, and lock it. This is the one thing most women forget to protect. Not because it's unimportant, but because it feels invisible in the moment. When you're going through a high-conflict divorce, your entire world becomes about survival. Legal forms, court dates, custody fights, financial stress, it all demands your attention. And somewhere along the way, you stop noticing how much it's taking from you emotionally. You stop checking in with yourself. And by the time the dust settles, you barely recognize who you've become. People assume that once the marriage ends, the healing begins. But that's not always how it works. High-conflict divorces leave scars. They rewire the way you see trust, safety, relationships, even your own self-worth. And if you don't actively protect your emotional health during the process, the damage can last long after the legal part is over. Maybe you've stopped sleeping. Maybe you've started doubting your instincts. Maybe your anxiety spikes every time your phone buzzes because you expect more bad news. That's not just stress, it's trauma. And no judge, lawyer, or court order is going to fix it unless you decide to make it a priority. This means therapy. Yes, even if you think you're handling it fine. It means building a support system that doesn't just cheer you on but reminds you of who you are when you forget. It means setting emotional boundaries as firmly as legal ones. Not answering every message. Not taking the bait in every argument. Not letting the person you're divorcing keep living rent-free in your head long after they've left your life. Ask yourself, what would it look like to make my emotional health part of the divorce strategy? Not just an afterthought? Can I include therapy costs in the settlement? Can I create routines now that rebuild my sense of safety and identity? Because the most important thing you walk away with isn't money, or property, or custody. It's your peace. And if you don't protect that, if you don't fight for that, you risk getting the divorce but never truly getting free. Looking back, most women don't regret getting divorced. What they regret is how much they didn't know to protect. Not because they were careless, but because they were exhausted. Because when you're trying to survive day by day, it's easy to miss the long-term consequences quietly building in the background. These 7 things, retirement accounts, insurance, shared debt, digital assets, future inheritances, harassment protections, and your emotional well-being, aren't just legal details. They're lifelines. And if you forget to secure them now, you might wake up months or years from today realizing you escaped the marriage, but not the damage it left behind. You deserve more than a technical win in court. You deserve a clean, clear future. A life that isn't haunted by what you overlooked or gave away in silence. That means asking the questions no one tells you to ask. That means not rushing just to be done. That means protecting the version of yourself who will have to live with the results when everyone else has moved on. So take your time. Reread the agreement. Ask again. Get the answers in writing. Because this isn't just paperwork. This is your peace. Your power. Your next chapter. If this video helped you see something more clearly, or if you're in the middle of this fight right now, leave a comment below and share what stood out to you most. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications. We're creating more videos just like this to help you protect what matters, speak up when it counts, and walk away stronger than you ever imagined. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourself. You're not just leaving something behind. You're building what comes next.